Winter's grip is just beginning to relax on eastern Canada's frozen Magdalen Islands. But in the midst of this cold climate, a hot conflict rages on. As the days slowly lengthen, thousands of harp seals converge on the ice to give birth and initiate their photogenic pups into the rigors of survival. For more than a century, the pups were hunted for their coats, the adults for their fatty meat. Perhaps, if the white-coated infants didn't appear so cute and cuddly, this annual rite of hunters would have gone unnoticed. Instead, it has become an international cause célèbre. For the past 30 years, as the hunting begins, the winds of controversy rise. Those who want to save the seals clash with those who want to sell them.
He's got a knife. Drop the camera,
leaving the fate of both people and seals at stake. 15,000 people live in the Magdalen Islands. Many of them make part of their living from seal hunting. In the struggle between the lives of seals and the way of life, the Magdalenos, as they call themselves, are at ground zero. I'm Dan Blackburn in Canada's Magdalen Islands. Life here in winter is harsh. Fishing stops and seal hunting begins. So too does controversy. The issue at hand is whether or not this community and others like it in Atlantic Canada have the right to make a living from an unpopular harvest of a natural resource, the seal herds that gather nearby. Criticized for their practices, hunters say they're just trying to survive.
You don't feel you've been treated fairly at all, do you?
No, for sure. Like I told you, we had the same heart as you, the same one. But if you took my bread off of me, I'm not gonna like you.
To animal rights activists, it's not a question of fairness, it's a question of right and wrong.
This is barbaric, it's from the last century, and it's way past time for it to stop.
But that's up to the Canadian Department of Fisheries.
It's certainly not the intent of this department to stop the seal hunt, because we consider the seals as another renewable harvestable resource.
Tourists visiting the area to go seal watching struggle to put the dilemma in perspective.
No one likes to think about sweet little innocent creatures being popped over the head. It's appalling, but at the same time, when you think about people that have lost their jobs and humans experiencing hardship, that's hard to see too.
40,000 people here in eastern Canada lost their jobs when the industry they relied on most, fishing, collapsed. Now, more than ever, they need the seal harvest for survival.
Sealing has been a very important part of the tradition and culture of Newfoundland, the Magdalen Islands. They've always done it. They believe it is their, quote, God-given right to do so. And they don't want to be told by anybody, insiders or outsiders, that they can't do what they've always done. This is a clash of values, period.
The life of a harp seal starts where most animals could never survive. It looks harsh and uninviting, but the ice floes will briefly serve as a crossroads for the harp seal's life cycle. Migrating from the north, they gather in the same wind-scoured regions of Atlantic Canada every February. Here, the females nest in whelping patches, where they give birth to their pups. Thrust from the warmth of its mother's womb into a frigid white nursery, the newborn pup starts life small, skinny, and uncoordinated. Within a day, its coat dries and fluffs. At this stage, the pup is called a yellow coat for the color of its fetal hair. 2 or 3 days later, the pup becomes a white coat, thin at first, but gaining weight rapidly through constant nursing. Its mother's milk is more than 40% fat, 10 times thicker than cow's milk. And on this high-calorie diet, the pup gains more than 4 pounds a day, eventually tipping the scales at 60 to 100 pounds within 2 weeks. By then, the pup becomes known as a gray coat for the dark juvenile fur that starts growing in underneath the fetal fur. Then, one day, nursing abruptly ends. The mother simply leaves and never returns. On his own at 3 weeks old, he lives a sedentary lifestyle and starts losing his white fur. This so-called ragged jacket phase lasts about a week until all the fur has molted. As the ice melts, the immature seal becomes known as a beater, a name reflective of its initial swimming skills. Eventually, it learns to dive, feeding on a broad spectrum of crustaceans and small fish. The life expectancy of an individual seal is 30 to 35 years. Its most significant natural predator is man. We'll examine this delicate and sometimes dangerous relationship when we return. The seal pup is star of its own show on ice. In Canada's Magdalen Islands, it's hard to escape the marketing bonanza aimed at a growing eco-tourist trade. Every year, about 500 wildlife enthusiasts come, spending a total of $500,000 in the process. Their presence and their money add something of a safety net to part of the local economy.
People just love it.
Steve Morello of Natural Habitat Adventures says tourism here may also help the seals.
So what you're doing contributes directly to the survival of the harp seals?
I hope so. I certainly hope so. I hope that it not only contributes to the survival of the harp seal, but it contributes to a new way of thinking and a new way of dealing with natural resources.
This is the encounter of a lifetime for tourists like 21-year-old Emily Bright, who spent her savings to fly from Indiana just to see the seals for herself.
What inspired you to come?
Spur of the moment thing. I've never just gone out and done anything by myself like this before, so it's pretty exciting.
The human impact is shared by all ages. John and Julie Dayton of Virginia came away with memories of a magic moment in the wild.
All my life I've been reading books about wild places. Now that I've reached the stage in our lives where we can actually go and visit some of them, it just confirms what we had hoped, which is it's a wonderful world. It's a wide world and wonderful to be in.
The privilege to be able to see it all.
The seals have become significant in the lives of these visitors. As they discover the seals, they discover a part of themselves. But this isn't the only way the seals enrich human lives. For thousands of years, man has relied on the seal for food, clothing, and survival, especially in the cold, stark regions of Atlantic Canada, where the mammal played an important role in the early settlement of colonies. Seals helped fuel the fishing industry, and the region's economy began to prosper off nature's bounty. Seal products, lamp oil, leather, and fur, were exported to North America and Europe. In the 1950s, however, scientists became concerned about the large number of seals being killed. But it would take more than their warnings to change the nature of the hunt. The anti-sealing movement was born in the mid-1960s, amid claims of cruelty. Pictures like these and tales of mass destruction sent shockwaves throughout the world. Mounting pressure ultimately forced the Canadian government to respond. In 1965, it implemented seal protection regulations, which included controls on methods of killing, licensing of hunters and their vessels, and, for the first time, quotas. Regulations notwithstanding, increasingly forceful activists called for the hunt to end. In 1976, media-savvy Greenpeace used its high-profile tactics to gain attention when it brought movie star activist Brigitte Bardot onto the ice. Now, the protest movement was in the spotlight. There were human blockades.
The block in the boat. We're not letting them come through.
Activists used harmless indelible dye to render the seal's fur useless to the hunter. Then they were arrested.
I've been apprehended. in the dying of seals contrary to the seal protection regulations. Over.
These disruptive actions helped persuade the European Parliament to ban the import of seal products in 1983. With markets shut down, the Canadian government was forced to impose restrictions on its seal industry. It imposed a ban on commercial hunting of white-coat pups, the symbol of innocence etched in the world's memory. But hunters still would be able to take a limited number of pups for non-commercial use. The European Parliament was not impressed. Its embargo continued, effectively reducing the seal trade. Finally, it seemed the hunting issue had been put to rest. But not for long. That story when we return. Take a tourist helicopter out onto the ice floes off the coast of Canada's Magdalen Islands, and soon enough, little black dots appear on the ice below. Once you land, seals are everywhere. On the ice floe, it seems the only instruments aimed at these seals are tourist cameras. The view through the lens is what they expected to see: peace and innocence in the wild. But during this trip to the ice, it was apparent something else was happening a few miles away. Activists say this helicopter is hauling young seal pelts, a sign of hunters doing their work. The commercial seal harvest is once again in full swing, and for good reason, say Canadian officials. To understand, we must go back a few years. When Canada's Atlantic cod fishery collapsed in the early 90s, it left over 40,000 people jobless. With the region's economy falling apart, Canada's government looked toward a resource in abundance: seals. By 1994, the seal population had soared to about 4.5 million, and the government said culling these numbers would help depleted cod stocks recover. But many scientists disagree.
The northern cod stock declined due to one factor, and one factor alone: overfishing. Now people are claiming that the harp seals are impeding the recovery of those same cod, and those claims are not supported by any available scientific evidence.
Nevertheless, harvesting seals was an obvious solution to the region's economic woes. Significant government funding, about 1 million Canadian dollars a year, was put aside to help develop markets for seal products and to pay hunters for their as yet unmarketable harvest. Valid as the economic arguments sounded, anti-sealing activists renewed their campaigns, even though seals were by no means an endangered species. As they had in years past, activists focused on the perceived brutality of the hunt.
It's a real bloodbath out on the ice right now, and it's just as bad, if not worse, than anything we've seen in the 70s or 80s.
Killing animals never looks pleasant, even when it's humane. What is humane hunting?
The intent is to kill the seal as quickly and as painlessly as possible. The intent of the club, which is probably by far the most humane method, is that it causes instantaneous death in the seal.
The club method is the most humane. It's very effective. The skulls on this species are very thin, and it's very hard to miss. It depends, though, more on the skill of the hunter. So it's like any hunt. You have good hunters and who are making good kills, and you will have some hunters who make less clean kills.
I find it a bit ironic, an ironic use of language, that we talk about hitting things over the head with a club and calling it humane. But I would agree that the club or the Norwegian hackapick, when used by a properly trained and motivated sealer, is entirely consistent with the way we kill animals, other animals in our society, killing cows with captive bolt guns, for example. The reality, however, is that out on the ice, things don't always happen that way.
The hunt happens 90 miles offshore, completely out of sight of any kind of controlling forces. They try to patrol it, but they really can't.
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans denies these charges.
We check permits, and when we target an area, we verify a large proportion of the skulls to ensure that all of them have been crushed. If the skull is crushed, that ensures that the killing was humane. There's a very strong, even self-policing effect amongst sealers. The slightest suspect incident is reported to us by sealers saying such and such a group may be suspect on such and such a violation.
It's difficult to convince the anti-sealing movement of such thorough enforcement, though.
Well, first of all, look at some of the video that we've obtained showing how they're hunted. This hunt is cruel. It is absolutely brutal. They're skinning animals alive, catching them on hooks. It's just horrifying.
We don't find necessarily sealers using clubs and hackapicks. We find sealers using an instrument called the gaff that was outlawed in this country in the 1960s as a sealing tool. We find sealers hooking live animals with gaffs.
DFO officials challenged the legitimacy of this footage.
We've seen in the past where we've actually had sealers bribed to perform certain illegal activities. Now, there's an inquiry going on, and I can't comment because I don't know what's the background and how this situation came about.
They're doing it for a number of reasons. One, they can make money at doing it because the Canadian government subsidizes it, money out of the Canadian taxpayer's pocket. Two, I suspect, unlike most people, they see nothing wrong in it. And three, look, perhaps more than anything else, it's a day of fun for them. You can hear them laughing.
Another contentious issue is IFA's claim of hunters supplying a growing black market trade of seal penises.
There's still a large illicit trade in the genitals of adult male seals. They're killed in large numbers and they're sold as aphrodisiacs in the Far East. And it is absolutely disgusting that the Canadian government is subsidizing this kind of a business.
But we consider it, we have a total use policy. We're trying to maximize the whole use of the seal. So therefore we shouldn't be throwing anything away that's worth money.
All of these accusations and denials have led to mutual distrust, which has sparked confrontation. On both sides, people are getting hurt. We'll examine possible solutions when we return.
Here on the ice, for the moment, it is peaceful. Both the seals and the tourists oblivious to the controversy that is swirling only a few miles away.
It's just a huge mechanized slaughter out there. Saw dozens of men clubbing thousands of baby seals. They're using $500,000 helicopters to haul the pelts back to shore. I saw unbelievable waste. 86 carcasses laying in one small area. Mothers crawling back over to sniff at the dead pups. It's just a nightmare.
A few days later, Katie, wearing a hidden camera, tried to get a closer look.
When we landed on the ice, we had official observation permits from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We had every legal right to be there. All we were planning to do was walk forward and observe, and we were attacked.
Alfred, he's got a knife out. He's got a knife out. He's got a knife. Drop the camera. Drop the camera. He's got a knife.
They are out of control. They just don't care. The government denies that this is going on, but we're unable to even inspect the pelts. I landed on the ice 3 days ago, and every animal that I found, we inspected well over 100 carcasses, and every single one of them appeared to be a white coat.
In response to Katie's claims and IFA's footage, DFO official Roger Simon had this to say.
That's a typical misrepresentation of what the seal hunt is all about. I think the fact when they argue the white coat point is to know actually what is and what isn't a white coat. And fundamentally and legally defined, a white coat is a Harp seal pup which has not begun to molt. So when he starts molting, he's no longer a white coat. On the exterior, the seal may look white, but in effect, the seal is molting and is about to lose all this white hair.
Under Canadian law, it is illegal to kill white coat baby seals for commercial use. A harp seal pup only keeps its white coat for about 12 days. Then it becomes defined as a gray coat. Although still a pup, a gray coat is fair game for commercial hunters.
The essence of this problem is that in the past, we always thought of white coats to find baby seals. But of course, a white coat at the age of 12 days begins to molt that white coat. And within 2 or 3 weeks, it has lost all of its white hair, and we call it a beater. Well, that animal is still only 4 or 5 weeks old. It still has to wait another 4 or 5 years before it becomes an adult. And, but this failure to define baby is very much at the crux of this issue.
Perceptions aside, people of Atlantic Canada still live with the unmistakable reality of a battered economy. Taking away the seal hunt would confirm hunters' worst fears.
And they stop all this. What's going to happen to us? We had to eat something.
Are people moving away from here?
Yeah, the young people are moving away, and they like to come back to Madeleine. But we are about 15,000 altogether here on Madeleine, and everything's come to the sea.
People always hate to see lifestyles go by the wayside. And you often hear an argument or an excuse of, well, you're not just losing jobs, you're losing a way of life. But what's the cost? And, you know, whether it's, if you're cutting down trees that are only going to last another 10 years, well, in 10 years, the logging industry there is going to be dead anyway. If you're hunting seals here, and depending on how many seals are taken and things of that sort, in X amount of years, there won't be any seals. Well, that lifestyle is going to go by the wayside anyway.
Does the tourism help?
Oh yes, that'll help. That's another sector that's helped a lot. But we can't leave just with tourists. We couldn't, no. Impossible. Just for tourists, no. We're going to have to leave. That's for sure. You can't leave here on this island without the sea.
I can understand where some sealers might say that we're attacking their way of life or trying to impose our values on them. But that's not what's really happening here. What's really happening is just looking for common standards of decency. Cruelty, abusing animals, breaking the law, that's not tolerated anywhere in the world, and it shouldn't be tolerated in this seal hunt.
We're at a stage with harp seals, at least, where I think we can get a lot more accomplished by talking to each other and sharing ideas from both sides of the camp in a nice, humanly fashion than we can by beating each other over the head with signs and yelling and screaming and telling each other that we don't know what we're talking about. I think there's certainly room for compromise on both sides of the issues.
If you could speak for the people who live here, what do they want? What would be good for them?
Good for them? Peace on the island. I am a fisherman. I am a hunter. I had no choice of being born here. I get born here. I like my island, and I want to stay here. Let me do what I had to do. Make my living with the seal hunting, with fish, all this, and we will shake hands.
But it may take more than just a handshake to calm the storms of conflict that buffet the vast Canadian ice floes, making both hunters and harp seals into victims.